Hi, everyone. This is the Perspective of Viv podcast. My name is Viv, and welcome to the show. Today's title is Enlightenment with Dean Graves. Dean Graves is a renowned meditation teacher, mental health counselor, and spiritual guide with over 20 years of experience in the field. Through his expertise in mental health and deep spiritual understanding, he provides a holistic approach to healing and growth. With his compassionate and insightful guidance, he has inspired and empowered people from all walks of life to embrace mindfulness and meditation as a path to greater self awareness and spiritual awakening. Thank you for joining me, Dean.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here.
I love that. So, just before we start, fun fact I'm watching this show called Supernatural, and it's about these two brothers that hunt down demons. Okay. One of the brothers' name is Dean. So, when we
No
first,
relation.
no relation. So, when we first matched, I kept thinking Dean, 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 because I watched the show religiously. I was just watching it before we started recording. So, I wanted to tell you that.
Okay, well, good. Thank you. I've watched the show somewhat myself, but not as religiously as you have.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
such a good show. I highly recommend listeners. I highly recommend Supernatural.
Well, it's shows like that, and that in particular are entertaining, but they also serve to expand the possibility of our thinking.
Yes,
And so, for
totally.
particularly the unaware, it's a good resource.
Definitely. And you know what's funny? You say that, and the title of this episode is Enlightenment. Like it's just so funny how,
Yeah.
it's funny how all these themes, because by watching it, I've been able to think more about angels and life and people and what purified really means and all of that. It's so many things, so many layers. But let's get into the questions.
Okay.
So we'll start with the foundation. What is consciousness to you, and why is it important that we understand it?
Okay. With that, that may take several episodes in and of itself.
Ooh.
Yeah. Everything is consciousness. You and I are consciousness. Everything that we see, everything that we feel, everything that we hear, all of that is consciousness. Consciousness is a distortion, and it is created um, for one purpose. All of creation is consciousness. It is created for one purpose, and that purpose is to allow the one infinite creator to know itself by experiencing itself.
Hmm.
And so we have experiences of creation has experiences, and it is through those experiences that the creator knows itself from an infinite variety of viewpoints, of lenses. And so, consequently, we, by virtue of being incarnate, and our incarnation is only one aspect of our beingness, and by virtue of being incarnate in earth or wherever, we are experiencing a very intense aspect of our evolutionary journey.
That's a very interesting answer. Thank you for that. One thing that stuck out to me was you saying it's consciousness experiencing itself.
Mhm.
And it's kind of like you're saying that reality is a mirror and the people that are around us are sort of reflections of who we are subconsciously. And by looking at them as a mirror, we get to reflect, but we also get to understand ourselves from different perspectives. Is that how you see it?
Well, close. We have experiences with other aspects of consciousness, and those other aspects of consciousness provide us with a lens or a mirror of ourselves. And by virtue of that mirroring of ourselves, we have the opportunity to fulfill our purpose, which is to explore ourselves. We the range of consciousness that we all experience is a very elementary range of consciousness.
Mm.
And each range, there are 8 ranges of consciousness that are called densities. We are currently sharing our experiences in third density, which is third from the bottom. And by virtue of that, we have a curriculum that we are obligated to fulfill, just like going to school. You have a curriculum for different grades that you go through in your academic explorations. And as you fulfill those curriculum requirements, then you prepare yourself for the next range of consciousness or the next range of experience. And so consequently, we have had lots of difficulties as a population in learning those curriculum requirements. We've been trying for quite some period of time, sometimes more successfully than others. We have a habit of cycling within the range of consciousness that we share, called a density. There are essentially an infinite number of incremental steps that are identified as dimensions. And we vacillate within a range of those dimensions as we evolve within the density and move upwards in the dimensions, then the degree of vacillation diminishes. So we become more uh, consistent in our not only our behavior but in our understandings, and we demonstrate that in how we interact with the world around us. For people that we observe to be um, more desirable to be around, people that are moral, that are integrous, demonstrate awareness and consideration of others, are demonstrating the behavior that naturally emerges as we evolve to the higher ranges of consciousness within our range of consciousness.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Sure.
So many people are searching for a purpose. In your view, what is the purpose of creation and how does that connect to our individual life purpose?
Well, there is no difference. The purpose of creation is so that the one infinite creator might know itself by experiencing itself as participants, as consciousness participating in creation. We all have exactly the same purpose, and our purpose is to explore ourselves and evolve within the consciousness path, which is that's synonymous with the enlightenment path. There's no distinction, just two different names for the same thing. Our
Yes.
consciousness evolution and enlightenment is the same thing. Our mission is unique to us, and we discover our mission by simply doing what we like. What we like, if we do what we like, then we become proficient at that because we like doing it. And when we become proficient at it, then it brings to us the types of experiences that we need to fulfill the curriculum to fulfill our purpose, which is, of course, to explore ourselves.
How would you personally define God?
God is a religious concept,
Hmm.
and all major religions that I'm familiar with are founded on the same principle. And that principle is that we are separate from God, that there's a
Hmm.
God and that there is us,
So
which
true.
is erroneous. That is the concept of a lower consciousness perspective. The reality is that all is one. There's no hierarchy of importance of an individual. We are the one infinite creator experiencing ourselves at this range of consciousness. And so the objection that I get from most people is that they feel that they think that that is very brash, very egotistical to say that we are the one infinite creator experiencing ourselves. But the reality is, when you can intellectually understand that, or you can intellectually reject that, but as you do the work on yourself and explore yourself and move yourself along the enlightenment path, then what we are doing is surrendering our perception of separation. And by virtue of surrendering that perception of separation, we begin to feel that we are, to the extent that we are able, the one infinite creator. So it becomes a very humbling experience. And so instead of exacerbating any concept of ego or um, self importance, it diminishes that and it gives us more direction, more comfort, lack of stress, lack of need to defend and protect this erroneous false perception of self that we are designed to create in this range of consciousness with each reincarnation.
Thank you for your answer. It was so layered. And I would like to ask before we move to the next question. So, you wouldn't say you're religious, or would you say you're spiritual? Well, how do you define that aspect of yourself? Since you said God is a religious concept.
Yes, because the concept of God requires that you perceive God as being separate from you. No, spirituality is a vague term. And, if you need a label, then spirituality would probably be a good label, but you don't really need to be labeled. You just have to
Mhm.
understand that you're part of the enterprise of creation and take comfort in that.
Wow, that's a very good answer. And I like that you said that the religious component of God, or the religious definition of God, has that thinking that there's separation. The foundation of the teachings that we learn when we're reading more about the world is that we aren't separate from God, or the concept of God, or divine intelligence, right? Or creator, connection to source. My point
Hmm.
here is that I guess that's why people always say it's easy to manifest, it's easy to create the life that you want, regardless of having that message of separation with religion. One thing I do appreciate with Christian texts is the fact that they give Jesus as an example. And, I've read somewhere that they taught us that Jesus was who we should look up to, but Jesus was teaching us how to be like him.
Hmm.
Uh,
The distortion that Christianity places upon Jesus. Jesus was what is called a wanderer, which simply means that his metaphysical self was more advanced than this range of consciousness.
Mm,
And is his gift to us was to incarnate as a human, and with no uh, relatively speaking, no special privileges. In other words, he was subject to all the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune that we experience.
mm,
And through his greater awareness, which is what we're tasked with the curriculum of learning in this range of consciousness, he became a model. And that's how we learn as humans. All consciousness learns by modeling others that they deem to be happier than we are. We're
mm,
all motivated to get more of what we like. And in order to discern or to determine what it is that we like, we go through an endless process of analogy, of comparison and contrast. So if you decided that, for example, chocolate ice cream is your favorite flavor of ice cream,
mm,
and when you go into the ice cream store, you're going to go stand in front of that little bin where the chocolate ice cream is and wait until you get your chocolate ice cream, but there may be 149 other flavors of ice cream. And in order to determine that chocolate is your favorite flavor, you only can do that by virtue of tasting a number of those other opportunities and through the process of analogy, determining that chocolate is your favorite. And that is the nature of experience. Jesus was a model for us of greater happiness, of greater peace, of greater connection to source. And he's not a savior. We are obligated to do the work ourselves. We have to do the work on it. That's our participation in creation, is to surrender the distortions of perception and align ourselves more completely with that behavior and that understanding that Jesus demonstrated in his tenure here on earth. Now, Jesus did that same thing in a multitude of other third density experiences. And so the Savior part is that he's given us a model to emulate and to narrow the necessity of our variant explorations of what brings us greater happiness.
okay. I definitely understand where you're coming from. And that leads me to my next question, if we're really being honest. In your writing, you speak about identity as a source of stress. Can you explain the identity model and how it relates to human suffering?
Well, we have a design. We function under what is called an archetypical mind, which is very simply a blueprint for how we process thought. And everyone on earth functions under the same archetypical mind. And part of the archetypical mind requires us to, or it doesn't require us, it gives us the high probability that we're going to create an ego, which is the same thing as an identity. It's the same thing as a hierophant if you want to be fancy. It is a false perception of self. And so we create a different identity with each incarnation that we have, primarily based upon the body type that we have for that particular incarnation and the influences, for the most part, of parents and siblings and friends and so forth, until we realize we have an awakening one day that all of our things that we've been doing that we deem to be important are actually not providing us with greater happiness. And we realize that what we really want through all of these gettings is a greater happiness. And so at that point, we are tasked with using the awareness that heretofore has been pointed outside of us to measure other people's reactions to our identity, to learn to invert that same awareness that we have heretofore had pointed outside of us inside, and become aware of what it is that we have created that is perpetuating our stress and suffering by virtue of this false identity that we create. Stress is anything that we don't like. And so it is a spectrum. It can be simply something as simple as I don't like cream in my coffee. I like black coffee instead of cream in my coffee. That's very minor stress if you don't have cream for your coffee one day, all the way up to what we would consider traumatic. An experience that we consider to be traumatic is nothing more than an experience that so challenged the authenticity of our identity that we were unable to process that experience at the time that we were encountering it. And because we were unable to process it, it creates a gap in our stream of learning. And it's for that moment, for that thought that we interpret or unable to interpret, we are in a condition of shock. And shock is nothing more than for that moment, our awareness has left our body. And the healing of traumas actually is what I do in my mental health work is very simple. You just simply have to aid the person to focus their awareness on that moment. And it's usually with one thought. It may be two or three thoughts in a perceived experience, and guide them to focus their awareness on that moment, finish processing that moment, and the trauma goes away. But that notwithstanding, that is the nature of our experience, that we create this identity. And in order to do, as we were talking about at the beginning of our conversation, to elevate our awareness and move upward in the range of consciousness that we all share, it's necessary to heal the emotional baggage, which includes the traumas that we've created, nothing more than lessons that we didn't learn at the time that we had the experience, and begin to become aware of the beliefs that we've incorporated into this erroneous identity, this false identity. And as we become aware of these beliefs that we've incorporated as part of our perception of self, and we begin to throw them out because they no longer serve us, then more of our authentic self, which is always there, begins to emerge. And so we get happier because it creates a void in this identity that we've been promoting for most of our lives. And as we allow those spaces to develop with it, when this in this false identity, happiness is automatically fills the void. And so we get happier. Happiness is not something that we can get, it's not something that we can give, it's something that we become.
Hmm. That's such a good answer. How do we know when we're getting closer to enlightenment? Would you say that one of those things is dropping labels?
Well, enlightenment is the process. It's the process of consciousness evolution. It is the process. And let me back up. In order for the creator to experience it or to know itself by experiencing itself, if you understand that before creation began, the creator was all that there is, or and still is all that there is. But if there's nothing else, then you have no perception of self because you have no mirror, you have nothing that to interact with. And so the creator projected an environment that's called intelligent infinity and projected into that environment an analog projection of itself. The only difference being that the analog projection was intoxicated with free will. Free will, unlike the most philosophical arguments that debate whether we have free will or don't have free will, we certainly have the choice to turn right or turn left or go forward or go backwards or whatever. But free will is the perception of separation. So, this analog projection of the creator, which is purely conceptual, was intoxicated with free will and perceived itself as separate from the one infinite creator. And that created the originating creator was the creator as the object, and the projected analog projection of the creator was the creator as the subject. And that created the first subject object relationship. The creator as the subject, therefore, began to develop all the rest of creation and created these multiple ranges of consciousness. Being in the third range of consciousness, we are significantly intoxicated with free will. We keenly believe that we are separate from the Creator. Our evolution is the surrendering of that perception of separation incrementally. And by virtue of doing that, we surrender our distortions of perception of self and become more aligned with the one infinite Creator. And it's a long process. We're not beginning, but we are have a long way to go in our evolution. So, the process of enlightenment is the process of sobering from this intoxication of free will, which is our perception of separation. Those that are been deemed enlightenment in our past, including Jesus and Buddha and Lao Tzu and countless others, again, were as Jesus was, he was what's called a wanderer. He was a higher consciousness. His metaphysical self was much higher than our experience. And they projected an analog projection of themselves into our range of consciousness in order to be models for us to become more aware and advance ourselves along the path. The Buddha was an extreme example of that. And his enlightenment was very simply remembering his higher level of consciousness, or to a degree, significant degree, beyond what we know in this range of consciousness. But that is ourselves in the future. And we are evolving towards that, and we will move as quickly towards that as we devote ourselves to the process of exploring ourselves, surrendering our perception of self and of separation, and moving forward along the enlightenment path. Right now, our analog projections of our metaphysical self. And so we exist, our eternal self, as in the metaphysical world, and we are an analog projection of our metaphysical self. And we do this, as I was explaining at the beginning of our conversation, to experience an intense perception of separation and forget who we are. And so, by virtue of that, we are essentially an experiment. And when a scientist conducts an experiment, he wants to take out of the equation as much of his biases as he can so that the experiment will be a true reflection of the parameters of the experience. We begin each lifetime with where we started, where we are in our metaphysical self, and we have experiences based upon that platform beginning level and create this false perception of self, and are tasked with surrendering our false perception of self and moving forward by virtue of the learning. After we complete an incarnation, then none of the things that we deem to be important, or there's no U-Haul behind any hearse. It's all what is preserved is what we have learned during this incarnation that fulfills the curriculum of our advancement along the enlightenment path. And those very simply are the inherent characteristics of the Creator, which are delineated in the course of this exploration, which is awareness, love, unity, wisdom, unity, and stillness in that order. And with this range of consciousness, we are tasked with becoming awareness, which is the foundational inherent characteristic of the Creator, and the necessary step in order to learn the lessons of love, which we will do in the next range of consciousness. So we get peeks behind the curtain. So we have the opportunity to feel love periodically in this range of consciousness.
Thank you for that. Do you believe we're spiritually awakening as a planet?
Well, we are in a very dramatic change on the planet. Our consciousness has escalated to the point that we qualify for an additional range of help. And if there is a rule that is very similar to the Star Trek rule of non-interference, the
Hmm.
higher consciousness uh, used to interact more frequently with us in our ancient history, but we declined in our consciousness level. And so we were pretty much quarantined for thousands of years to allow us to develop. And we, as a population, have again achieved essentially a platform level of awareness that you might say qualifies us. It's not exactly the right term, but it qualifies us to begin receiving this additional help to guide us into further interactions and integration into the greater cosmos. And so, yes, we uh, are raising the consciousness of the population, but by virtue of that raising of the consciousness, one of the strategic things that we have to do in this range of consciousness is make a very strategic choice, and it's simply called the choice. And we have to choose whether we are going to polarize service to others or polarize service to self.
Hmm.
Those polarizing service to self are choosing to enhance the perception of separation by enhancing this ego, this identity that we create. And that is considered to be the indirect path back to the creator, because you will be able to evolve through several ranges of consciousness until you literally hit a brick wall. And at that point, you'll have to go back to the beginning and start all over again to learn the lessons and fulfill the curriculum of the service to others path, which is the path of unity with the creator. And we have a bifurcation. What we're seeing in the bifurcation of the population around the globe is the division that is being enhanced by those having chosen the service to self path from the service to others path. And so that is the source of the friction and the extreme efforts of the service to self to maintain control that they have maintained for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Because in order to be successful along the service to self path, you have to dominate and subjugate others.
Hmm.
And so consequently, they are being extremely challenged right now, and they're very fearful because there is a vast amount of the population that has chosen the service to others and are emerging into a sufficient awareness that they no longer are willing to be subjugated and dominated by the service to others. So we are just beginning that level of intensity.
How can individuals contribute to a more conscious, evolved humanity?
By working on yourself, the population is comprised of obviously billions of individuals. And what we can do is work on ourselves and heal the distortions of perceptions of ourselves. And by virtue of doing that, we become miniature models for others to emulate, just exactly the way that Jesus did, only in a less spectacular fashion. But, people observe you every day. And the key, what is going to attract them to you is your demonstration of greater happiness by virtue of surrendering these false perceptions of self and aligning yourself and allowing yourself to feel more of your creatorness as you go through the course of your day. And as you do that, then you become a radiant model for others to emulate.
Thank you for that. I thoroughly agree, especially with the part where you say you work on yourself and people start to look at you and emulate because you inspire something inside of them. You activate something inside of them by being your full self, which is such a beautiful thing, which is why being in community or allowing yourself to be seen for who you are genuinely can change the world. And if each person is activated by another person shining, then we all begin to shine.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I
Beautiful.
mean, that's how we learn that if we
Yeah.
emulate others that we deem to be happier than ourselves. And those that are the most happy are the ones that have allowed more of their authentic self to emerge.
Yes. So true. Now, you've written 4 books and host 2 podcasts. Can you briefly tell me what inspired you to dedicate your life to these teachings?
Well, that's an interesting question. I led a relatively normal life for my first 50 years, and I had that awakening where I became aware that all the stuff that I'd been doing was possibly definable as successful, but it wasn't making me happier. And so I sought other avenues that incrementally provided me with greater happiness and greater understanding of the process and the system. I began to meditate, and I highly recommend meditation. I teach meditation as well as guide people with their mindfulness efforts. And it is through that that we learn to invert that awareness inside of ourselves and begin to heal. We begin to heal distortions of perception and the emotional baggage that we've collected and heal all of those things that are there. We become aware of the beliefs that we've incorporated into our false perception of self that perpetuate our suffering. We are magnetic. We attract the experiences that we need in order to learn the lessons that are available to us. And so while we remain ignorant of that, then we perpetuate our suffering and our stress by virtue of trying to change the world around us. And the more that we try to change the world around us, the more frustrating that becomes, and the more that we enhance our stress. Stress is very simply our teacher. So every
Hmm.
time that we experience something that we don't like, the message to us is to look inside and say, okay, well, why did that displease me? What it is about me that attracted that experience? What do I need to become aware of, and what do I need to heal? Suffering is simply, if you think of stress as you hit yourself in the head with a 2 before one time, suffering is when you keep bopping yourself in the head with the same 2 before, unaware that you're the source of the problem rather
Hmm.
than the external experiences that you're encountering. Happiness or bliss is simply defined as perfect happiness, which is the absence of stress. And so, as we do the work of healing and we fulfill our purpose, which is to explore ourselves, then we are reducing our stress and getting happier incrementally as we move towards the goal of becoming bliss.
I totally agree with you. How would you say your life has changed now that you've awakened and fulfilled this purpose or are in the process of fulfilling your purpose in doing what you like?
Well, my life has changed dramatically. It's nothing like my first 50 years. I was keen on business and making money and all that sort of stuff. And that has become not totally inconsequential, but it is far down the scale of what I deem to be importance. I have what I need. And as you do the work on yourself, then you begin to realize that you are manifesting not overabundance, but you're manifesting what you need. And so, consequently, it's not a matter of doing without anything. There is abundance. There's no reason for anyone not to experience adequacy of what they need. The only difficulty that we have as a population is the influences of the service to self that emphasize hoarding and lack of sharing. But there's nothing that is absent from our ability to have adequacy of what we need. That's part of the design.
Thank you so much for that. So, last question for you. If there's one truth you wish everyone could deeply understand, what would it be?
Well, the one truth that I would love for everyone to understand is that they are the one infinite creator
Hmm.
experiencing itself at this range of consciousness. And once you begin to intellectually accept that and you begin to interpret your experiences within that framework, then you begin to feel the changes within yourself as you do the healing work, as you begin to surrender these perceptions of separation that perpetuate our stress and suffering.
Thank you so much for that. Now, if something in today's conversation resonated, unsettled, or opened something new in you, that's the work beginning, listeners. To explore more of Dean's teachings, visit ddeangraves.org. You'll find his books, podcasts, and resources to deepen your own awakening and help contribute to a more conscious, evolved humanity. And if you're on your own spiritual path and looking for intuitively channeled message exploring what awakening means for you, you can find me at Perspective with Viv on all social media platforms. Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and remember the answers are never out there, they're always within. Thank you so much for being on the show, Dean.
Thank you for having me, Viv. I've enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Till next time, listeners. Bye.